This
So you mean like
conference
July?
will now be recorded.
So we'll call to order the Monterey Select Board on August 15th at 6 p.m. We have all three members of the board present here in Town Hall. And our first order of business is meeting with Kevin West, who is the new tree warden that we appointed about a month ago. Thank you, Kevin, and he's going to provide us with a general update on the trees.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you very much for making the time. This is not there's not a lot of business here, but because I'm appointed, right, and because I don't have an established relationship working with the town in this capacity, I thought it might be worth a few minutes of your time, and certainly worth a few minutes of my time, just to give you a quick update on kind of what I'm seeing, a month or 6 weeks into things here. The first thing I did was to meet with Jim Hunt. Well, once Melissa kind of got me onboarded and I was sworn in and all of that, the first thing I did was to meet with Jim, and we had a great conversation and drove around and wound up driving around actually for probably nearly 2 hours, looking at trees together and getting to know each other a little bit and getting to understand, getting me to understand a little bit about his philosophy of how he manages the highway maintenance, and trying to understand how his jurisdiction overlaps with my responsibilities. And it was just overall a very positive conversation and a great way to get started. And he was very welcoming to, to me as a newcomer to this. Since then, the main work I've been doing is to, I've driven all the roads at this point with an eye on the trees, and I've completed a proper tree survey of Tyringham Road, Mount Hunger, and Hupai. And I've got copies of this, and it's just informational. You don't need to do anything with it, but just to show you that that top piece. It's just to show you that these surveys are fairly detailed, and it's looking at the health of the trees along the road, and categorizing trees that need attention, trees that that are dying, trees that are a clear and present risk. And the overall assessment is that, except for ash, things look good, right? The fire company, the highway department has done great work. Previous tree wardens have dispatched their duties with attention and care. Obviously, there's been a lot of cutting by National Grid over the past couple of years. So except for the ash, things are in pretty good shape. Just a few, issues here and there. But
You
that's
said Tyringham, Hupai,
and Mount Hunger.
Mount Hunger, okay.
But of course, the ash is a really significant exception because they're dying, and they continue to die, and they're dying fast. And so if you look at that, if you look at that survey just to glance at it, the red ones that I have circled are mostly ash trees. Again, there's an exception here and there, but that's the real situation. It doesn't come as any great surprise, I'm sure, to the three of you, because I'm sure you're kind of up to speed on, the Emerald Ash Borer and all of that. But that's just where things are on kind of at first glance. So I looked at the Tyringham Road survey with Jim the other day, just to, again, make sure that we're kind of, in alignment. And he had a very good suggestion, which is that we should get together with National Grid. And I've already been talking to the National Grid folks, Lance at National Grid. And he suggested we get together just to share information and to align our schedules or kind of plans over the next 6 months. So we're putting a date on the calendar. Unfortunately, I have to go to Tennessee because of a medical emergency in the family. So it's not going to happen next week as we had hoped, but at some point in the next couple of weeks anyway, we'll have a kind of comprehensive look at what they're doing, and sort of what the survey is showing, what my survey is showing, and what Jim is saying in his kind of ongoing review of the roads. And to finish up this survey on in some detail is really I think the first priority for me as tree warden. The second priority, obviously, is to then assign priorities and to start taking care of the most that's the highest priority, the most risky trees around. And I don't have an exact sort of time frame for when I think we're going to start cutting, but, I need to have a sense of the landscape, and then before I can really assign priorities.
Can I ask, how are you prioritizing roads? Like Tyrion, like the ones you chose, I understand why you probably chose them, but I'm curious, because we have a lot of other roadways. What's your framework for prioritizing? I don't have a context for it.
I don't have a fancy methodology. I just thought, well, let's start at Tyringham. I mean, I live right there, and Tyringham is right there, and I was curious to see what it looked like. My sense is that I'll next do the kind of the trunk roads, the principal trunk roads off of 23. My thinking is that 23 is probably the best maintained of them all. Because of the three-phase lines, it's gotten the most aggressive cutting from National Grid. So my thinking is that that is the road that's got the most eyes on it, that's got the most cutting in the past year. So let's look at the principal secondary roads. Next I'm going to do Sandusfield and New Marlboro. I've looked at pretty closely, although I haven't surveyed it officially. Blue Hill, and then kind of the Lake Buell quadrant. That's my rough idea about how to go along. At some point soon, I'd like to communicate to the people of Monterey, to communicate to the residents through the Monterey News, just to introduce myself and to explain what I think the job is, and to of the survey. That's kind of the next thing on the works. Further down the line, I'm a little surprised that Monterey doesn't have a tree ordinance. A lot of towns have tree ordinances. A lot of towns in Massachusetts, a lot of towns in New England. I've pulled many examples of tree ordinances from towns throughout the region and throughout the state, throughout the region. And I think it's worth considering convening a working group or a kind of working committee to draft a tree ordinance for the town's consideration. Before, I act on that, I would love to have another conversation about what that would look like and how that kind of activity would work and should work within the structure of town and governance. But I just want to kind of put that on the agenda for further on down the road.
Good question, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
Without going into too much detail, what would a tree bylaw, what generally does it do? Is it about the trees on roadsides, or is it about trees on public property, private property?
They tend to cover both. Tree ordinances tend to describe the wishes of the town when it comes to managing public tree resources, and often they also will provide some guidelines, let's say for managing property, including ways to deal with disputes should disputes arise between residents.
Just so you know, in a town our size, ordinances are for larger towns. So what might be an ordinance in a bigger town would be a bylaw.
Okay, got it. Right.
So they might help resolve neighbors over trees that are between properties, or is it about trees on public property that go into private?
Yes, tree ordinances that I've looked at cover both of those scenarios.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely something we could consider adding to a town meeting warrant. Before you go too far, maybe it is worth sending some sample tree bylaws. And yeah, if going off of Susan's comment about, towns have bylaws, cities have ordinances, it might be worth trying to find tree bylaws. Not that ordinances might have something that could carry over into towns too, but what are similar bylaws that we could look at?
That's good advice. I'll take that.
Especially because bylaws in smaller towns often have less infrastructure.
For sure.
So that can mean that it has to be structured a little bit differently.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. And also then on the furthering this point of communication, I would love to see at some point, this is further out, hopefully by the end of this first term, I'd love to get some information onto the website for residents, basic information about, for example, pests and sort of the general frequently asked questions that might come up
Good idea.
when someone is curious about, when someone says to themselves, oh, we got a tree situation, can the tree warden help with that?
So I suspect that, like, if you have clear content and some idea of what you'd like, I suspect that Tia could definitely, I don't see a reason we couldn't put it up there. So I think that Tia could definitely help you with that.
Yeah.
And I was also gonna say that, you mentioned wanting to get out what you're doing to the public. One technique that I think we've had people use in the past that seems to work pretty well is if you write something for the Monterey News. After it comes out in the Monterey News, we can also try to get it posted on the Google group. So the same piece of work can go out to both groups, cause there are some people that do both, but some that don't. And it's a good way to reach a pretty decent portion of the population.
On that
That's very good
note,
advice.
one additional, so you can do the news and the Google group, and we can also, depending on the content, send it out through the official email list of the town. I don't know if there's an option at this point to sign up for specifically tree warden emails, and that may not make sense, but we have like a general emailing list, so if at some point you wanted to use that, we could probably set you up with that.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. My gut, or my first thought is, a little further down the road, if I can sort of build out some information, including some great information that's already available through the Massachusetts Tree Wardens Association, and sort of get, an information page built out there, we could potentially just send out, a blast saying, this is available as a resource, should anyone need it.
And our website can also post links, like I know for the transfer station, the transfer station page has a bunch of links like that, like the Recyclopedia, it's a state link. So it takes you to, like, you type in what you wanna get rid of and it tells you how to do it.
That's great, yeah.
So
Right.
same sort of thing, like even just having a resource where if they look at the tree warden page, it takes them to the state forestry or whichever the tree warden group that might have a lot of answers. You don't have to necessarily produce all those answers yourself.
Exactly, and that's my thinking. I'm not looking to
Reinvent the wheel.
Reinvent the wheel or draft a lot of content, but rather just to provide links to good information that's out there. And then as a final question for you, on this topic of the Massachusetts Tree Warden Association, where is it? I'm applying to join for all kinds of reasons, including the fact that they have great training and programs, as well as an annual conference that I think would be interesting to attend. Unfortunately, I missed the fall cycle of their qualification course. They do a 5-meeting qualification course, which is really quite interesting, and it's a qualification that apparently qualifies one to be a tree warden even in a larger town than this.
Oh, nice.
They do a spring course and a fall course, so I was too late for the fall. I hope to sign up for the spring. And just in general, I think it's a great idea for me to join. I think it's $85 for the year. Does the town have a budget to support that kind of membership, or is that something that I need to apply for out of my pocket?
So the budget this year for tree warden, this fiscal year is 49,000. Usually we use, I think historically all that money goes towards John Field or whoever has the contract at that time, but as long as the financial team is okay with it, I don't see why training couldn't go towards tree warden expenses.
Seems good to me.
Yeah, I think it's the right investment.
Yeah.
If he's willing to invest the time.
Exactly.
It's not- The
And-
cost isn't.
And I think that, if there's a cost to the training, it would be appropriate for the town to cover that too. Getting you trained is in our best interest.
The cost is not that great. I think it was $225, $250, something like that. So.
So we'll just double check that the treasurer and whatnot, accountant are all on board. I think the select board is okay with it coming out of tree warden expenses.
Right.
And I think it really, I can't see a reason why it wouldn't, so it should be all funded through that.
Dandy. All right, that's everything I've got. Any questions that I can try to answer?
I don't think you've gotten off to a good start.
What he said.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll just try to keep you posted, and of course, I'm always available if you've got questions or concerns or anything.
Thanks for coming to talk to us, actually, it was great to have the briefing. It's not a waste of time.
Okay.
We like hearing about cool stuff.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Devin.
Have a good evening.
You too.
So we do have a couple bylaw review committee members present, but that is scheduled for 6:30.
Dave will be here,
Yeah.
he's planning to come closer to 6:30, because you don't always.
It's your job to keep track of.
Yep.
So I think we will hold off on that until we have the chair present.
Okay.
How about Flint?
Capital planning policy,
So I did not get a chance to really look carefully at the one you sent out. Also, it didn't come up on track changes,
I
what you
didn't.
actually changed.
I didn't because it was gonna be messy, but
Okay.
basically,
Basically,
I took things from the list
Mm-hmm,
that was, remember how it was two lists?
yeah, yeah.
And I just incorporated them in the first. If I felt it was very redundant, I didn't. Thought we had it, yeah, but.
I didn't bring that.
That, so nothing substantively was changed, but
You moved all that list into different categories.
yes,
Yeah.
and I think I maybe.
I didn't do a check off, but that's what grabbed my attention. when I
Yes,
first read it.
that, and that's what we had kind of discussed last week, that's why I did it, and I moved a couple things around, like I wanted to keep legally required and community impact and administratively efficient kind of together, whether it's first or last, because I feel like that is the need or the benefit side of the
Right.
project, and then the flip side of the coin is the cost.
Right,
But that was the general gist, is I took things from that lower list, and I was gonna do track changes, but because we had discussed it, or I wasn't gonna do track changes because we had discussed it. And I
it makes
didn't,
it easier to see what's different, but
Yeah,
I totally.
but I didn't wanna make a messy copy,
Yeah, yeah.
and basically the list went up, so I think at this point, unless people wanna take things away or add questions or other considerations, whether it's whole bullet points or just things to the individual bullet point. The only other thing, which we didn't at last meeting have anything that we felt was missing or anything that we wanted to take away, we just felt like it was too redundant. Other than that, the only thing that I would consider is, we have this weird format where we say consideration will be given to, and then we have questions. If it doesn't bother anyone, I think it's fine. But really, the whole list could be questions, or it could be not questions.
I
You know what I'm
know,
saying?
I do know what you're saying, and I think in some ways I prefer it not be questions, but so for some people, I'm not sure, Frank, what do you think? For some people, it's easier if they're phrased as questions. I personally sort of feel like these are the things we're thinking about. To me, it's implied, but
I like this format than having all the questions at the end, okay? It gets at the same point, like identify the problem and evaluate. That's what they have to read this and think through what they're proposing to do. I think you could sit here and we could work on this for the next 3 months. I think the only request I would have is that under policy is that we would like all capital proposals being by January 1st. Because last year, we scrambled, with the fire company, what they needed. And two, if we do heavy capital investments this coming year, there's not a lot of money in free cash, we don't know what we'll have left over from the prior year. We're talking about financing things. And, we shouldn't put that pressure on ourselves. If you know you need something big, you should be working on it now, so it's there January 1st.
I would concur.
Jeff had
Go
his
for it.
hand up too.
Yeah, I just
Finance
had
committee.
two things. One was I was gonna say what Frank said, the policy should, that it's time sensitive, should have a deadline.
Mhm.
And it should be a real clear, firm deadline, that it's not like just send in a request, but you need to send in the full request, and that's why I think this format is good also, because it tells you the questions we're gonna be asking. And that the select board's gonna be asking, the finance committee is asking. I'm not speaking as a representative right now of the finance committee, but I think that I think it's a good idea, to have this format and to have the points that we're gonna ask, and to also have a time certain deadline, so that we can say, short of it being an emergency, we can say, this isn't gonna be considered because it's January 15th and miss the deadline, we're sorry, we'll think about it for next year.
So I can see the value in a deadline. I don't know that January 1st.
Well, I'm dated, that's what I started.
It was a tidy deadline,
What-
because it's like the beginning of the year.
I would say whatever date there is that doesn't put that pressure on the system, that gives people a chance to look at it, to assess it, to ask questions, to make a thoughtful, not a rushed decision 2 weeks before the warrants due.
Well, I think
Whatever the
January,
date is.
even if it's January 10th, that gives people a week after the holidays.
I'll make it the ninth.
It could be whatever's gonna do the trick for the select board and the finance committee.
So, and I think other than that, really what I did was reorganize. At this point, maybe the select board having this copy and the finance committee, I saw it's on their agenda next week to maybe approve the policy, but I'm hoping we can get on board and approve the same policy instead of two different ones.
That would be great.
Um,
This
Does
will
the
sound weird,
finance
but do
committee
you
have to approve it, or?
Well, it's up to the select board,
Up to you.
but it's up to us.
So what's up to us?
Approving.
Um,
But
We like to, we
It
like to
is-
Yeah,
try
I
to
don't
get-
think, in writing that's the policy, but we like it.
yeah, most of our financial policies have been approved by both. Richard, maybe it's a good practice.
I suspect that if you want me to, and it's not like super important, but since we're 5 lines over the page 3,
Mhm.
I'm willing to bet with not too much work, I can probably not lose content and get us down to that. I will
Yeah.
put track changes on, but would you be on board for me trying to do that?
Yeah, I don't care if you put track changes on. I mean, as long as you keep.
Well,
everything
just that way
substantive.
you'd see what I changed, and you could see if you thought I
Yeah.
changed a meaning, just because you could do it inadvertently, I wouldn't be trying to do it, but
Yeah.
I might accidentally do
It just can get messy,
Yeah.
track changes, it can get more
Oh,
confusing.
if I'm just cutting a few words to get it down, I don't think it'll be a problem.
Yeah, and then the only other thing is, could you add while you're editing it to procedures, to the end, I think to the end of procedures, there's 2 paragraphs, could we make a third one with the deadline? Frank, how would you word a deadline?
All capital proposals should be in by January 10th of the upcoming financial year.
Something to that effect,
Uh-huh.
Should
in under
be
procedures.
submitted
By January 10th.
and complete and submitted,
Yeah,
complete by January 10th, is that our?
for the upcoming financial year.
I'm never gonna get it down if we're writing
It should be a little soft, you want to be firmer than that? Must be?
Maybe must be.
We're using shall, right, maybe shall, is shall, what does that mean? I don't know how to
Shall.
pronounce that.
Must makes it pretty clear, put up or shut up, people.
Yeah, so must.
I would use must.
And I think that can go
You
as,
can't leave any gray area. It comes back and bites you.
so I think Susan will take charge,
I get that.
she will edit it down to 2 pages.
I'll try, but if I'm adding in
Well-
another paragraph, it might or might not work, but
Why
I'm gonna
the
give it a go.
margins?
Well, you
Why
can
the
just
margins?
you can change, you can mess with the formatting.
6.5.
The only thing that may get hairy is we will eventually compile all of our financial policies, we're pretty much close to being done into one handbook, which may have all the same formatting, and then it would change that, but
Cross that bridge.
we can't take that far.
Right, yeah,
Okay. So
thanks
you,
for doing that, cause it was not that straightforward to do, I think, so.
yeah, I mean, you can still probably find redundancies that may help you to get rid of.
It helps to have two sets of eyes do it, it's a little easier that way, you know? We've done it before and it worked, so
Yeah.
let's stick with what worked.
So Susan will do that and do you wanna send that to the select board and finance committee?
Yep.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the bylaw review committee is all here. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, you all came.
Well, you have a presentation, we got your document. I think we have some questions, but if you wanna start by presenting first, that would be good.
Think, if I may, thank you, Mr. Maycock, once I find my document. We had written, and we did not send on, because I don't know that we had finalized it, a preamble to what we were sending off to you. With my committee's permission, I will read that. And I can also send it to you after this meeting. We, the Bylaw Review Committee, were tasked with reviewing the current town bylaws, both as present on the town website and a print copy from 2006. That's what the little draft comment said. Removing obsolete bylaws, tightening up existing bylaws, and as appropriate, suggesting new ones to be considered by the town. As many of the bylaws referenced Massachusetts General Law, MGL, we have, when possible, included links to the relevant chapters and sections of MGL so that the townspeople can read for themselves, should they desire, what is said. A large aspect of our tightening up work was removing from the bylaws the phrase, "the town voted to accept," referring to MGL. We felt that as the town had voted to adopt these particular chapters and sections, they had become part of our bylaws. In addition, we moved out of the bylaws those items in which the town voted to adopt the provisions of a section of MGL, as these are not technically bylaws, but simply acceptance of parts of MGL. We carefully examined the relevant chapters and sections of MGL, and when we found that it was part of MGL and not subject to the town's voting to adopt, we so edited that bylaw or section of one. We also combined several sections into one, as these sections could reasonably and rationally be grouped under one topic. That is, example given, safety inspectors. We also combined disparate sections referencing one particular body, e.g. the select board, under one section, select board. Finally, we have suggested updating the non-criminal disposition of violations, fines, and generated a schedule of fines so that, should updates become necessary, the governing bodies do not have to scan the entirety of the bylaws, but simply suggest updating the particular class of fine, thus making easier that process. We also suggest that this committee, once our task is complete, not be dissolved, but rather turned into an ad hoc committee, which can be reactivated on a periodic basis to update and revise this new document. So that was our preamble to our work to kind of introduce more to the town than to the select board what we were trying to do, and we hope succeeded. Committee, anything you want to add?
I have a few questions. So you removed MGL acceptances from the bylaw document? I was just curious if we kept, or not that we're gonna lose it, but if we should also have a list of those MGL acceptances.
Yeah, I think what we were envisioning, if I remember, and this work we kind of did quite a while ago, so forgive us if we were a little hazy in memory. I think we decided whenever you accept a portion of MGL, that absolutely needs to be codified in a document, but just not within the bylaws. Like maybe at the end of the bylaws, the town has accepted the following, because they do all need to be there, and readily accessible.
My recollection was that Donna proposed like having on the town website where you keep everything, a PDF of the town's bylaws, a PDF of the town's zoning bylaws, and then a PDF that's MGL acceptances.
Great.
Great.
But do you have that list, like?
Did you create the list? In other words,
I think did we actually omit those sections? I don't recall that we omitted them.
I don't believe we omitted those sections.
I think it's easy enough to create.
I think we split it into two areas, Mr. Makeup. One, we got rid of the town voted to accept. Because we voted to accept it and changed it to the town accepted. In other cases where this is a law that governs how the town functions, I don't know that we removed it. We might have, because on one of the documents, Ms. Cooper, you and I talked about this earlier today, and I forget where it ended up. I think it's on page 37. We had a whole list of things that aren't really part of the bylaws, but were things that there were the non-criminal disposition, which referenced articles back in the bylaws. There was the agreement with the Grange that allowed for this building, etc. But I don't know that we pulled everything together. That might be future work for us.
it looks like they're not part of the, there's a section that starts on, see if it'll give me the, page 27, that has a sort of black ground that are not part of the town bylaws. And it says miscellaneous adoptions of provisions of Mass General Law. I don't know where section 1 is, so it starts with section 2, but non-criminal disposition, town agreement with Grange 291, absentee voting, Berkshire Regional Planning Commission, the town vote accepted. I don't know if that's the entire list or not, but they are still there in the list. With
Ms. Cooper, you said page 27?
Yes.
Yeah, I see that. Are all the yellow comments, or that are coming up yellow here, are they Donna?
They
Town council.
may well be.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the non-Donna version, so I don't know.
I'm just looking at the version that you sent today,
There are a few David Myers comments as well.
the red ones probably.
Your mine aren't coming up in color, so I can't give you that answer, sorry.
And for instance, I don't understand that it's being weird and like it's got all the comments in a black column, but it's not aligning with the thing they're commenting on, and I can't really switch back. I don't know why.
If I can, I want to impress upon the select board, this was an incredibly difficult task.
Yes,
Because we didn't even know that we had all the information that we needed, certainly not on the first pass, we came to realize. And we came to realize that there was information that was old, information that was less old, information that we thought we had all the bylaws, there were some typos on the website, there were other kinds of things. So what we tried to do is curate it for the select board as best we could, putting our thoughts in, recognizing putting our finalized thoughts in, so to speak, after we not debated, but discussed it. We had a very amicable and really good process, in my opinion. Recognizing that ultimately it's your decision what you want to present back to the town, if anything. But we wanted to give you the opportunity to see our thinking and to see some of our comments about pros and cons and leaving language in, taking language out. Some things we thought were redundant because we were acknowledging something that was already there that we were supposed to do, but it was already there, and other things that we thought really weren't necessarily bylaws, just a record of a vote on something else. But yet it was included as quote a bylaw, but it wasn't necessarily a bylaw.
Another question, what does the process look like for proposing this to a town meeting? Do we have to make it all as changes to our current bylaws, or can we propose a clean copy and more or less say delete everything that we have and this is the new copy? Do we have to have a marked up version? Because I could see that getting really confusing with moving things around.
Really?
I will just add to the confusion is that in this markup copy, we had 3 disparate documents. What's on the website, the
Right.
2006 document, and the printed version we were given by the town administrator. They
The
all
yellow book.
had a lot of overlap, but they were not identical. So the track changes are very easy to poke holes in because they don't track. necessary. So I think that it's important that we not lose any bylaws and that we don't put in anything that changes things
Wasn't
dramatically without, acknowledging that change and allowing town folks to understand that. But if we could do this as one document, to me, that seems like a much better and simpler method.
What has Donna commented as far as what's legal? Do we have to try to find out what's changed? I mean, part of what's changed will rely on what we count as what's current.
Right.
So I think it would be good to reach out to Donna and to say, what does she recommend? I also know that many times what organizations do, I'm not necessarily speaking about municipalities, but they do a clean copy and a corrected copy. They put them both out. We're gonna vote on the clean copy, but here's the track changes copy. So if you wanna go through, and in this case, the track changes copy is, as we just heard, messy because we're not tracking changes from one single document. So, but we could say to the town, in the spirit of transparency, here's the messy, lack of professionalism for a moment here, pardon me, here's the messy copy. And if you wanna go through that, you need to look at the yellow book, you need to look at the documents that Stuart was saying, and you can go through all of those. Here's our cleaned up version if you just wanna read that. And that way they have both, and we're not either confusing things by just throwing something that's very difficult to follow at them, but we're also not allegedly hiding something because we didn't give them that document. So here's both, and we're gonna vote on this clean one, but here's both in case you find something that inadvertently got dropped or added or what have you. And there were, by the way, there were new things that came up since we were elected or appointed initially, like the marijuana bylaw. That wasn't in the yellow book or in the old paperwork, and it was something that we had to,
So,
the more recent one.
it's almost like we need 5 copies, the 3 different original copies, the fresh, clean copy, and then choose one of those 3 and put track changes on it.
And I'm just gonna throw something else out there, I'm just thinking about my experience of past town meetings, and some of you have even more town meetings. And also what, if I was just attending and wasn't familiar with the process, and someone was saying, here's the old bylaws, here's what we're recommending, what would I need in order to feel confident making a decision about which one to adopt? And knowing my process, I would definitely wanna see what was the old, what's the new, and why are we changing it? And I probably feel like I wanted that for each one, because to me, I'm not gonna say yes to something unless I fully understand what was changed and why. And I might be like, oh, yeah, that totally makes sense, but I can't even make an informed decision unless I see that, and I recognize the difficulty with track changes, believe me, we deal with it a lot, so I'm just putting it out there, because I don't have a clear picture of how to make one document that enables that process elegantly.
Yeah, so I think there's like two things. One is all the stylistic, just putting things together in the right order, and, we can stand there and say, all of this is truly nothing substantive has changed at all, right? And maybe you do that as your first wave. This gets us all to where we are. Now, these are the 5 places where we're recommending something that is actually a different number of members, or a different time frame, or, something that is really actually a substantive change. Those are the ones that I hate to use the word trust, but if we can say that really honestly, this whole first pass of this is just putting things in order, and please feel free to find a place where we missed something or didn't do it exactly, and then just be super, super clear. These are the 5 things or whatever. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of substantive changes that we were recommending.
What kinds, I think the first thing we need to do is reorder and get rid of things that aren't bylaws and reword, and also just agree on an actual complete copy of everything. So it's almost like the
Almost like
whole
two
entire
ways,
first town
yeah.
meeting that this is presented, it should have as almost nothing controversial as much as possible. To allow, okay, now we have a clean copy, now we can make changes that we feel improve the bylaws. Stuart?
I think we really avoided the controversial issues. There's almost nothing in there that I can think of. You know, we were talking about changing the number of select board members, and then we just put that in a comment instead of in the body, because we didn't want to have a lot of controversy around this, so that it could be, you know, those individual things could be discussed by the select board or not.
Not to mention the fact that we can't do that in the bylaw.
We can't do that,
So-
it's an act of the ledge too.
So we were very cognizant also of the process. And and your responsibility versus our responsibility, that we don't make decisions, we're really advising you. And we had thought about perhaps having an open meeting for town comment first, before we brought these to you. And then we decided, that was the plan pretty early on.
Yes,
And we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna have the open town meeting, and the next step is gonna be to the select board after we integrate the comments of the town. And then we thought, at a certain point, we said, well, wait a second. That may not be the most sensible way to go, because if the select board takes a look at it and they say, what, forget it, you know? Why are we having a town meeting? And that's could be really disruptive and confusing to a lot of people. So instead, what we thought is we'd bring it to you to look at the changes that we are suggesting, both in form as well as in substance. And you might decide, rather than bring it to the town meeting in May, is it? The town meeting, is that you might use a different forum to educate the town about it, perhaps with some of the committee members and certainly the chair there, to educate the town about what the process was. So when it comes up at the town meeting where there's a big agenda and warrants and budgets and all the rest of it, that it's not a new thing that's first going to take 2 to 3 hours to discuss there or more. There's been a chance, maybe even more than one meeting, there's been a chance for an informative session for the town to hear from the bylaws committee and the select board about where we're at, without it being something that's being happening at the formal town meeting. So that's something you might want to consider if you think there's value in what we proposed and that you want to eventually get it on a warrant. It might make sense to have some informational meetings before that.
Might be a good way to vet what kind of format helps people to process the material as
And
well.
what we might think is
That'd be
not
good.
controversial really is, and we need to give it more thought, or somebody might say, well, what about this thing? You know, and how come it got lost if there was an inadvertent mistake?
So to Justin's point about finding a kind of the Rosetta Stone for this to start from, the website is live, so anyone who wants to look at that has access to it. The yellow book, we might want to scan and include in the email, and that's kind of the, so those two items are the primary documents that have been publicly available. And then the track changes, again, a lot of these things, because it was rearranged, did we keep in formally section 2 point, where it had been, we took that out?
Yeah, we took it out, yeah.
Okay.
there is a copy, which I'm pretty sure I sent to the select board, that has like section 2, parentheses, section 7A 15. That one sticks in my mind because it's the one that refers to the select board. 3 different sections, first saying the governing body is the select board. Then it says, Board of Selectmen, as it's understood in MGL, is called the select board. And then section 15 was like, oh, well, they can do this.
So without getting into, I think first thing is, without getting into any track changes or new copies or anything, could we get on the bylaw review committee webpage a copy of the various originals? Like a PDF of each various original? I feel like that's a good starting point the other thing that I think would be helpful is if we could get a clean copy, no track changes of what the bylaw review committee is proposing entirely, the whole bylaw is clean, no comments, no track changes, except maybe
You put draft.
draft, but flagging where anything controversial may have been changed, because the first thing that I would do on the select board is remove, I know it sounds like not a lot of substantive changes were made, but if the term of anything or anything was changed, I would get rid of it, and I would tell town meeting, we're approving this, and we have a plan going forward of recommendations to make these bylaws better, but first we wanna get all on the same page of what they are.
So the organization and the drafting, not the
So
small.
first
A clean
reorganize
copy.
and get it clean,
Okay.
and then come back to make changes that are more substantive, is that what you're proposing?
Yeah, I'm not saying no changes, like wording changes, like removing the vote was accepted for this or that, or I like what you all have done by combining the select board together and ordering it in a way that makes sense, because out of order, it's not very useful. So,
So yes.
do you
Justin,
have
I
a
could-
clean copy that you can give to us entirely
Of our work or the?
of your work? Of what you would propose the new bylaws be entirely clean? I mean,
Without track changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you do know
Probably
that, though.
some.
We could just make a copy of it, accept all track changes, and you're done. And remove comments, we can do that, yes, we can do that. We can do that. Yes, but make sure you make.
Yeah, but there's still a lot of problems.
I always make copies.
Right,
And
but
stop
then-
tracking.
Right, I see what
And
you're
it in theory gives you a clean document,
saying, but,
but sometimes things have been double deleted
right,
and such like that.
okay.
That's, I mean. And then we need to ask Donna, and I think we have before, and I forget the answers, how legally can we bring this to town meeting? Do we have to have it track changes things, and if we do, does it have to note when something was moved? Or can we more or less say delete everything, and this is the entirety of the new bylaws?
Problem, if I may, with just saying something was moved is because we're working on, with all this different information, all these different documents.
Yeah.
So it's not like we just combine these three sections into one, or we moved this from up here to down here, and now it's on page 5, because it's come from this other book that wasn't included in this, in the, on the website, or it's come
Yeah.
from some other piece of information that we got.
That's why I'm hoping the cleanest way to do this, in my mind, and I don't know if it's legal, but would be, here's a clean copy of the new bylaws, and we'll vote to accept this clean copy. And also attach, or at least put on the website and make available to the public by the town clerk, every old version that we have, and some kind of a track change thing that we can put together. But when we're voting, it's not voting on changes, it's just voting on accepting.
But you also
I don't
want
know
to
if it's
have
legal.
like flags where there's a kind of a big change.
Well, I would get rid of any, if it was even the most minor thing of changing something from elected to appointed or anything, I would try to get rid of every substantive change as much as possible.
What about
and do
leaving
those
that
in the
in a
future.
comment?
And do those in the future.
Do it, and he's talking about doing it iteratively. Step one is, if I understand correctly, step one is have a meeting where what we do is, clean the whole thing up, so it's clear what the foundational material is. And step two is deal with the actual substantive changes.
Okay, alright. There's a couple.
There is one case, like with the clerk, there's like, we actually did change to appointed from elected, but the old bylaws still says elected.
Well, we took a vote by ballot,
In 2017.
to change it, which doesn't change the bylaws. That bylaw specifies the term of office, right? But
The original one.
it specifies the term of office, it doesn't say, towns have to have a town clerk. I think that bylaw, if I recall correctly, sets the term of office, it just mentions that the term of office will begin in 1970. And it maybe that's not the year, but it specifies at the election of 1970. I don't know if you leave that in there or not. what's important is the part that specifies a 3-year term. But in that instance, the select board may want to do a 1-year term for the town clerk. And we could consider that rather than a 3-year term, but I think in the first pass, we don't touch that, because right now we just need, because we could get hung up at town meeting for 5 hours
That's
past
right.
nothing.
Right.
That,
If we just try to, and we tell people, look, we know there's things we wanna change even now about this. We wanna change the 3-year town clerk term to a 1-year. But for the purpose of this meeting, we just need to pass the current bylaws substantively in a reordered, reorganized, cleaned up version, getting rid of anything extraneous that was never really a bylaw, incorporating all of the bylaws that really were, and reorganizing it.
And some of it is clarifying language, and I'm just gonna pull one example, right? So the old bylaw, or the current bylaw, no person shall operate a motor powered boat. So we said motorized water vessel, right, because that, right, and it says, in the new area of Lake Garfield situated west of the Tieringham Road, and we're adding in the area commonly known as Brewers Pond, because that clarifies it. We're not changing the location, we're just clarifying it so people understand. So that, to me, is not substantive, but it is changing what the words say. So I don't know.
That's tricky. My gut feeling is to make the changes like that and just provide the old copies. And also provide track changes as best we can so people can go through and look at them. And for the most part, they should be non-controversial. If someone realizes you said east of Tieringham Road instead of west, and you actually referred to the whole major lake.
Right, yeah.
That'd be good. Hopefully we do have people reading through it and criticizing it. But I would personally include changes that, like you said, really are substantive, but reserve anything like changing a 3-year term to a 1-year term for the next.
Or changing the quorum, I think the quorum was probably the
Quorum.
biggest one I
Yeah.
can think of
Yes.
that we suggested a
Yes.
change, we'll just leave that out for
Right.
now.
Okay.
Wait till we get it all right, and then,
The quorum for voting.
I think it's an excellent suggestion, and it's easy for us to do that.
Yeah.
We'll have to read it with a critical eye, and we may have some questions of whether or not you agree or disagree around sensitivity or, substantive changes.
Yeah, I think something like quorum, if it was 14 for the first pass, my proposal would just be keep it
keep it
14.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then note that that's something that we wanna change at the next town
The
meeting.
next iteration.
Right,
So you could actually have two clean copies in a sense. You could have the clean copies that you're voting on today, and then you could have another clean copy that has all the comments, but these are the things that we're thinking about, if you wanted to put that out, or you could just save that yourselves for when you thought you wanted to first address it in the select board to see if you even wanted to propose at the formal town meeting. I still think it may be worthwhile to consider having some type of informing session for the town or discussion session. I don't mean a formal town meeting, but where people can understand it before they get there to the town meeting. And there are also some fines, the issue around fines, we had made some suggestions about that. And I don't know if you'd want those now or you'd want those later, in a sense.
Are they part of the general bylaws of the town?
The fines are.
They
Yeah.
are, and we've changed
We've
that
changed
structurally so that it doesn't embed the fine in the specific bylaw.
I think.
But it says a class of fine, and then all the classes of fine there's a fine schedule somewhere in this as well. And that can then be addressed and you change, so in 10 years, if you say, these $10 fines, we wanna make them $20, you don't have to go through each individual bylaw and repropose that, you can just change the class of fine from 10 to 20 and you're done, so we just did that kind of
That
as
was a structural change.
And I would say that's, like, to me, that's the first version, because you're not actually changing anything, but you're just changing where it is. You're not changing the fine, you're just having the table of fines and saying class A, and it's the same amount, right? $25 fine is class A, so you have a class A fine, and there it is, class A is
Yeah.
25.
In reality, that sounds, that's what we wanted to do. there were some that didn't fit, and we wanted to make sure they all fit in one of the classes, so you didn't have, you know, a $7 fine and a $5 fine class. So there were some minor changes, and I think there was one around voting that we upped the fine, because we thought it was.
But I think they're saying to
Too
keep the
late.
But I
fine,
think-
keep the fine the
I
same.
think
Yeah,
we
change the
can
class of
everything
that
the
back.
same.
I think we can try and do what, so it will take a little work, but I think we can do what Susan says, and I do think that that's probably a way to be consistent and to get the trust of the people that we're not trying to sneak something through without letting them know. I think, yeah.
The only major hangup remaining, if the general consensus is to make a clean version with as few substantive changes as possible, essentially none, just formatting, reorganization, and clarifying what exactly are the bylaws of the town. We just need to figure out how we can legally vote this, and if we need to do track changes for the legality, we need to really decide what our bylaws are.
But that may be part of the problem.
That may be part of the problem.
And I understand, if I recall correctly, that even once we pass it in town meeting, it is not actually a bylaw until it is approved by the Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts. So if we're going to send them a single document with all this in there, I don't know what they require. I'm sure Donna can help provide that information, but I don't know how they'll feel about a single document.
Well, that's what she's gonna hopefully tell us what she thinks. And I'm sure no matter how careful we are, they're gonna come back with something or other that isn't, even if we're reflecting our old bylaws that may not have been approved by them. We're probably gonna come back with some changes, but at least if we have everything in one document and then one letter from the AG's office or multiple commenting on what, I think what's legal should still stand.
My sense is that we can't be the first town that's doing this kind of cleanup, and that they've come across this before.
They may have a.
So they may have, Donna may know, and they may have no, right, we're not the first town.
I would imagine.
So going forward, does the bylaw review committee want to take on creating a clean copy
Without the substantive
any
changes.
substantive changes as much as possible?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then also providing the board with the original copies just in one place as much as possible. And we can hold off on trying to create a real track change document, because that is the beast of all of this. And in the meanwhile, we can touch base with Donna on what we need to do for this to be legal.
And will you also ask whoever, the clerk or whoever, to take the yellow book and just make that into a PDF?
I think that it would be whatever you all used to base
Well, we
the
have
new copy
We have the
on.
website, which also was difficult because it was, you have to, each
Well,
one is a separate.
ideally, if we had the clerical ability, I think it would make sense to condense everything on the website into a single PDF.
Correct.
I think that's really the
And
right
the
thing
yellow
to
book.
do.
And the yellow
And the
book,
yellow book, and did you say there was a third version that you used?
there was.
Version from Melissa.
There was a version from Melissa, which was the first document I sent you all.
So if we could get, I mean, ideally, each one of those in a single PDF.
Right.
I
In a
think
single
that,
PDF?
yeah, in 3 different
Oh,
PDFs.
PDF.
Yeah, so you'd have to.
So the Melissa copy will be easier to do. I can have that to you tonight.
Yes, it's the other two, I mean, especially if you consider them in making your current one, assuming, well, we'll have to hear from Donna about whether or not we need to know what our current bylaws are to pass new ones.
And then we also have a fourth, dare I say, a fourth document of sorts. So we have anything that was passed anything that was passed very recently.
So what did we the most recent bylaw changes we
changing
made
this one.
were, well, we did the bylaw review committee, we
Yeah.
changed the bylaw review committee, and then at this town meeting, we adopted a Department of Municipal Inspections bylaw.
Yeah.
Which got amended a little bit on the floor, and you'd have to talk to Chris about whether or not we actually got that back from the AG's office, assuming it wasn't
So
Yeah,
an
it's
that's part
acceptance.
of the problem is that it's like,
But there's not too much in
Not
that
too much.
category, Jeff.
yeah.
There's not too
There may
much.
be that marijuana, I'm not sure. if
The marijuana was passed before me.
Before, yeah.
Was that on the website?
It
That's
was,
on the
it's on the
It's on
website,
the
but
It's on the website.
but was in a different place, I think, that's why we
Is
didn't.
that what it was, Sandal? And you prefer, I mean, ultimately, is the objective to have a PDF on the website, or can it be done kind of in HTML that's a little easier to work with, more like a traditional text website?
I think a PDF is really helpful because it can't be changed, it can be
It's
printed
easier
out
to
all at
print,
once,
it's easier to print.
nothing gets lost.
Okay.
And I think at some point, we'll have to talk to Donna, but if we can avoid making a legally binding track changes version, I would hope that we can, not that we can't make some sort of one to alert people to what the differences were. But to make a track changes, we would need to agree on an initial version
Yeah.
that is legal. And then if we had the one that we're proposing, that would be easy enough. But if without agreeing on one of the three that is the official one, well, I'm hoping that we could get away with the only legally binding thing being the one clean new version. But I
I would
don't
like to
know.
underscore Mari's suggestion also is to find out how the Commonwealth has dealt with other towns that have gone through this process. Because I think that can help us from reinventing the wheel and going through a struggling process when there may be an easier way that towns have done. I mean, we're not the only town that's had bylaws in different places, so to speak, since the formation of the town 176 years ago, or whatever it's been. So they've had to have dealt with this before and may have a process that we don't even know about that's easier to manage if indeed the select board, and it sounds like you do, want to go forward in the way that you're talking about.
I hope Donna will inform us of when we ask her, and we did before, and I don't remember the answer, and we're at a different place now, but hopefully when she informs us of what legally we have to do to do this, she informs us what's the
It
easiest.
would have been nice if we had, here's the old bylaws, document A, and here's suggestions for document B, as opposed to document A, B, C, and then how do you track change of that into, otherwise you're annotating
Right.
every line of however many dozens of pages you have, and every change in every line from which document to the next, and that's
We
it.
don't know how many other towns have had it. I mean, I expect that we will not have been alone with having more than one document that was being merged or had gotten done separately or somehow separated. But there may not be a standard way to deal with
There may
that,
not
because
be.
it may be a kind of haphazard thing that's just happened to come about.
I don't think that the town clerk has the copy of that yellow book. We have a copy
She
of the yellow
does
book.
have a copy of the yellow book, because I saw her Monday when I met with her.
She did, she
Yeah.
does.
The town clerk,
Not the
Marie?
clerk, but
Oh.
Melissa had
Oh.
a copy of the yellow book, because that was
Yeah.
the first one time I saw it, and I was looking.
Is it the town zoning bylaws or is it the town bylaws? Because there's
I thought
two.
it was- I thought it was the bylaws.
Yeah, the cover
Two.
of some of the yellow
cover's the
books is
same.
labeled zoning, but it's a misprint.
Yeah,
so let's,
just want,
Melissa,
Yeah.
want to make sure that they'll be able to scan it, that's all.
I have a copy of the yellow book, but it wouldn't be one to be scanned because it's my personal copy with my notes in it. The official
Yeah.
keeper of any bylaws is the town clerk.
Okay.
so I think going forward, I think we all kind of agree for the bylaw review committee to make up a clean version that's just reorganized and reformatted and no substantive changes. Not,
Agreed.
don't get rid of this one where you propose some reasonable substantive changes, but let's do that, and let's check in with Donna. David, maybe you and I could talk to Donna about the process, and maybe she can put it in writing, what exactly we need to do as far as clean version versus track changes versus old for posting on a warrant, and what the Attorney General will accept. And then we can go from there, because it depends on what she says we need to do. How we move forward.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks for all of this.
Yeah, thank you.
Just
It was
give me
probably kind
maybe a
of a
week or
nightmare.
so lead time, Justin. Classes begin soon and my schedule gets a little more hectic.
Okay, yeah. We'll try to figure that out, and maybe don't go too deep into anything else before we figure that out.
When will you let us know?
as soon as David and I can
Oh, okay,
figure it out.
with Donna.
We'll be on standby.
We'll probably set another meeting.
We should. I'll email people for dates.
Fun, it's all starting again.
Hey,
But it's hard for me to believe a clean copy with all the formatting and reorganization without any substantive changes isn't going to be helpful, because even if we decide, or even if we learn that track changes need to be done, that clean copy will inform us, and we'll just need to pick one of the three, maybe Donna will have guidance,
mhm.
and go from there.
As, I know we're trying to, you need to move on, but just as another thought, the process. A clean copy, whether it's an official copy to the community or not, and whether it eventually finds its way up to the legislature or not, clean copy may be helpful to the select board, just for your own deliberations.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that you can say, okay, you know what, we don't like this fine, for example, the bylaws committee said it should be $30, whatever the number is, we think it should be $25. So then you're at least working off
This
of
point, we're
that.
not gonna make any changes though, so.
Yeah,
Whatever it was.
but when you do, you're at least able to see where it is and then being able to go from there. Even if you don't have our, and then you can look at our stuff, well, they said 30, we think it should be 25, so you can at least look and then decide what you want to change, because you may not want to change things that the bylaws committee is suggesting, or you may have other ideas.
And town meeting will have ideas.
And town meeting will have
So
ideas.
that's
Oh,
why
no doubt about that.
the first pass has gotta be
Gotta be
as
clean.
non-controversial.
And you'll have
Yeah,
ideas
very
that come up at an informal town meeting.
I think it's a good idea, it's a good approach,
Great idea,
clean and simple and
great idea.
one step at a time.
Let's call it an informational.
Information.
Or a public hearing.
Public.
Public-
hearing.
I
Great
was-
idea.
I was searching for the
Great
term,
idea.
but thank you. That's what I meant.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
and
I
everyone.
thank my committee. I couldn't have done this alone.
And we'll be in touch. There we go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great evening.
Yeah.
Nope.
Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Is that friend you have with you?
Did you get stuff?
Moving in.
You can listen to it. It's not-
Yeah, I
mean,
do, I need to go to the bathroom.
There's
so.
a, you know, I can just update you, but I have nothing solid.
About what?
So
Oh,
just to touch base quickly, so we wrap up. Draft capital planning policy, Susan is cutting to the 2 pages and is added to that.
Yep.
Frank, so then the next thing is fire company lease renewal, and I'll repeat myself as usual, I actually need to use the restroom, so I can't stay.
But as I understand what you said, go ahead, go. You don't really have anything.
Well, I talked to Chris the lawyer on Friday.
Okay.
And so, you know, he's opposed to a 1-year lease because of the dollars that are involved that
Right.
they would have for going. So we put that on the back burner and we talked about how can we, you know, or one of our objectives that you and I have talked about is can the work be done or does it have to be done on prevailing wages? And he was gonna research that. Now, he got back to me Monday afternoon and said, what are the specific works that they're willing to put into the contract and a budget for it? So I sent his email to Melissa and Sean today, asking them, could I have the specifics? Because the Monterey Fire Company in the draft lease they gave us said, oh, within 60 days of signing of the contract, we'll tell you what work we're gonna do. And he wants it to be more definitive, and he has a contact. You know, I did a little bit of research under the Massachusetts labor standards for prevailing wages, and there's a lot of contradicting information. And so, not surprisingly, so, you know, I sent it out to Melissa and Sean today, like at 2:00, 1 o'clock, so I'm gonna have to wait till they get back to them, so.
If, Frank, that information's in the draft lease that you have. Do you need me to send it again?
No, and the draft lease that he sent to us, it said within 60 days. in the old lease, it was listed the projects. In the current draft that I have, it says within 60 days of signing the contract, we will tell you what work we're gonna do. It
I'll
wasn't-
resend you the one I have, because I know there's a list in it.
Okay. So that's the update.
Okay.
And he acknowledged my email today, so he's looking at it.
Okay.
He's working it.
We're back, Justin, if you're out there.
Yep.
Good timing.
Okay. The open space and recreation plan committee appointments, we discussed last week, so I assume we could just go ahead and make the appointments, and I assume for the term of 1 year. The only question would be if we want to time these to coincide with the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. Or have them end on August
Only
15th.
6
next year.
months, right, or so.
It would
8
be,
months.
what are we,
We're
it'd
not.
be 10 and a half, I think.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
This is gonna sound like a weird question, but if we create this committee, how does that go forward? In other words, who gets the responsibility of sending notification to all those people and actually establishing a first meeting? We wouldn't have a chair till it met.
So what will happen is, like I think with our normal appointments, Melissa will send a letter to these people. And then,
Try to
I-
register a first meeting?
yeah, they will, email about scheduling a first meeting. Cause we've created a few new committees, like transfer station
Right,
committee
right.
and bylaw
There's a
review
lot
committee.
of people.
Yeah,
But I guess if Melissa did like a, what is it, survey monkey poll thing to see when we
Yeah.
can set a meeting.
but I think a lot of
Get
these,
it that way.
people,
These are
They're
folks that
fairly
are around,
flexible,
yeah, it's just a question of that, when you have that many people, it becomes, like, if you have 3 people, it's easy to make a meeting. If you have 8 people, it's not so easy.
so, what do we feel about June 30th or going a full year to August 15th?
I suppose doing June 30th, so we can have it,
Yeah,
On
I
the
would say
regular
that's
cycle.
a regular cycle.
So then I would move to appoint, through June 30th, 2024, to the newly created Open Space and Recreation Plan Committee, the following people, Jerry Claren, Tracy Brennan, Susan Cooper, Margie Abbott, Melissa No, Jim Hunt, and Dennis Lynch.
Second.
Any other discussion on that? We'll call a vote.
can I vote on myself? I
Yes,
guess, yes.
It's complicated. Yes.
and yes, so that's a unanimous approval. Thank you to those people for volunteering. And then out of that will come an open space and recreation plan, or
Real
open
quick,
space plan.
can the select board members sit on the committee?
They asked, so VRPC recommended,
A select board member.
A select board member,
Okay.
thank you to those people. The next appointment is Highway 4, which I can go over briefly, but if Melissa, if you're on, might want to explain the situation.
I am. So Sheldon, who was recently hired as the Sunday person at the in the position, Jim's talked with him. Jim would have him work Sunday through Thursday. He would also help solve our issue with not having a cleaning person anymore for the town building. He would do that. We're planning on Mondays, and then Tuesday through Thursday, he would help Jim with any small in the winter time and any small jobs around the highway department.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's just a little bit of a different structuring, but it fills a couple different needs of the town, so. I will move to appoint Sheldon Langley to the Highway 4 position, as a hire for an indefinite term.
I'll second.
Second.
If there's no other discussion, we'll call a vote.
Yes,
Yes,
And yes, so that's unanimous approval. Thank you, Sheldon. The next item is a special event application for a wedding through an organization called Rights Collab.
Yep.
Any questions? I'll move to approve the special event application for Rights Collab.
yes. Second, sorry.
Second,
Second.
alright, any
And
discussion?
yes,
We'll
yeah.
vote yes.
Yeah.
So that's unanimous approval of special event application. The next agenda item is the town administrator contract. So I added this to the agenda. The current town administrator contract, in the section terms on page 3, specifies that this agreement shall become effective as of March 1, 2021, ending on February 28, 2024. Then the next paragraph is if less than 6 months' notice is given, Ms. Snow shall be compensated at her salary rate for said month or months within 30 days of the termination of this contract. So I thought that it was a little bit ambiguous as to what notice means. Does notice just mean termination based on A, B, C, and D below, or does it mean the natural end of the contract on February 28th, 2024? I think one plain reading of it is that it's only about the termination clauses below, except that it's found in the section above, which talks about the natural 3-year term of the contract. So I asked Donna, because I thought that it might be an executive session material. What she explained is that it would be, we could enter executive session, we never have to enter executive session, but we could enter executive session to discuss negotiation strategy if we want to discuss what the town wants to offer in a future contract to a town administrator. But if we're not negotiating particular points of the contract, it's not executive session material. She did agree that 6 months notice, I mean, it doesn't really specify about what, but basically to be prudent, it would, if the select board at this time does not want to renew this contract, that ends on February 20th, 2024, as it stands, it would be prudent to give a notice now, which is 6 months ahead, to say that the town does not wish to renew this contract. That doesn't, I don't think the purpose of the discussion tonight is to discuss a future contract after February 28th, 2024, in any capacity, but more so if the board feels that it doesn't want to renew this particular contract, then it would be the prudent thing to give notice at this point in time. Like I said, it's ambiguous, but Donna did agree with that and did draft a letter saying the same.
Some language to
Yeah.
formalize that. I think that is prudent, because it is loosely worded and that gives us some protection, and I would go the next step and say, I think it also behooves us, because if we want to start thinking about how we would do the review that might go into the formulation of another contract, and I'd even go so far as to say, not just for this potential town administrator, but for any, like, what would we like the town administrator contract to look like, irrespective of who that would be for, which is another conversation. It might be the time for us to start having conversations with HR about what the process should look like to get there. So that's it's a second thing, but I think it's part of the same thing, because I don't think that's gonna happen overnight.
Right.
And I don't think we wanna put off thinking about how we want that process to go forward.
Yeah, and this is Monterey's I mean, Monterey had one town administrator, and then this is our second attempt. And this is the first contract and job description for this attempt, so, it's definitely worth a review. That being said, really, the purpose of tonight is, and I think this sentence alone and its ambiguity, not touching the rest of the contract, is reason to not renew this contract. I can make a motion to that effect if there's, unless
I
there's
think
further
I agree
discussion.
with what you two
Yeah,
said.
me too.
So I would move that the board, give 6 months' notice to, Ms. No, that the current town administrator contract will not be renewed, and that future discussions about the town administrator position, contract, and job description will happen at a future meeting. But just that this contract with Ms. No will not be renewed and it will end on February 28th, 2024.
Did you follow all that, Melissa?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a second.
Second in the
Second,
motion.
yeah.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay, we'll vote,
Yes.
Yes,
and yes, so that's unanimous approval. And I will send a letter to Melissa, just an official notice, just exactly on what the motion was. That this contract will not be renewed, future discussions about the position and contract will be at a future date, at a future board meeting.
And I just think it would behoove each of us to have schedule some time to have a conversation with Sophia about how we wanna structure going forward.
Right.
What, all the things we need to consider for like job description, for process, employee review, how to do the timing of the employee review to make it make sense for, going forward with, if we're gonna go forward with another contract, we need to think about how to incorporate that
Right.
process into that. And I also think we probably need to include, and this would always be the case with a renewed contract, but maybe a yearly thing of having a look at the local salaries
Mhm.
ranges for full-time TAs, cause when this was done, it was sort of cobbled together with the secretary and the part-time, half-time one and half-time the other, and I think that being honest about what the position is and making sure the salary is competitive is important, whoever holds the position.
right.
It's still necessary to do.
Okay, the next item is the payroll policy. I got we all got and printed out some answers to the questions that we had from Melissa and the treasurer. I'm just looking at this now, so I haven't had a lot of time to digest.
Okay.
I
I thought you asked some really good questions.
Yeah, I thought the comments were very good from both you and the others. The only thing that I raised is, on payroll disputes, should we have to say there'll be a response in 2 business days?
Hmm.
I mean, when you think about it, that's what Don didn't feel like he had a response.
He only gave it 24 hours, but yes.
Yeah, but you say 2
Yeah.
business days.
I think that's a good,
Well, yeah, I think recalling that sentence, it kind of said the employee will be notified once all the questions are figured out. I think whether it's 2 business days or some other amount of time, there really needs to be a preliminary response. Because it may take weeks to figure out what the problem is and what the resolution needs to be.
But it really, gets down to for people that have, when are they getting their money? I mean, that's the first question. 2 is that we can say, preliminary, this is it, here's how you, when the dollar amount or whatever it is. I mean, I think that, you know, Melissa's email a week ago was articulate enough to show what happened in this, what resulted in this error.
I'm amenable to that. Where
I
exactly
put
is
it,
that?
I sent it to Melissa,
Okay,
my copy, late in the afternoon.
But
so, yeah, so I mean,
as soon as the matter has been fully researched.
where are we talking?
Well,
It's the last page, payroll disputes, and it's the second
Okay.
sentence. The town administrator will then research the issue with the treasurer, and a response will be provided to the employee by the town administrator as soon as the matter has been fully researched. But I think, you know, if we need to add some language in there, because that may take a week, and people, need to get paid, and
and
there needs to
there
be a
needs to be,
preliminary
you know,
response.
an idle mind can be terrible, you
Yeah.
know? Okay, so if someone, you know, you raised a complaint, you know, and, you know, on a Friday or something, by Thursday they hadn't heard, we need to say, give them some kind of initial response.
So a preliminary response will be received within 2
2
business days.
Right,
And we can say preliminary response, because that may be
Well,
all we can provide at that point.
right.
Right, yeah.
The other thing that I noticed when I read through it was this issue of the payroll warrants.
Where are you? Jim?
Without approval.
This is in payroll processing and issuance of paid checks
Uh-huh,
on the third bullet. And basically what's been happening is payroll warrants have been going through, and then the select board signs off after the fact,
mhm.
which really isn't that big of a problem, because when we have noticed issues, they have been corrected through direct deposit. It's not like when we send out a vendor check, it may be too late.
Right.
They may have already, we always approve vendor warrants before the checks get sent. But in payroll, it's not as big of a deal, but we just need to figure out, and Melissa provided a few options here, so maybe we can review them, and then go from there. I have, based on Melissa and the treasurer's comments, I have some wording changes that I would propose.
Okay.
But I haven't yet.
Also, like, it does occur to me, like, it's a bigger deal to change the dates, but might that still be a good idea? I mean, I think what I said was, if I can, how did the current dates come to be set? If mass law trumps all, should we be using dates that align with mass law and allow for smooth operation?
I think the only problem is that payroll needs to be very timely. So payroll's being submitted on Monday and hitting checking accounts, I think, on Thursday.
Right.
So no matter how you set the dates, you're always gonna wanna be paying people in a reasonably timely fashion.
Yeah,
As opposed to vendor warrants, which
there's a lot more.
businesses can wait a week
Yeah.
or two.
Right.
So
Point taken. Okay.
we can explore it for sure. I mean, if
But
it
the
means,
dates might not be the smart way to fix it.
yeah, I don't know if it really can be fixed because it would have to be, we need people to get paid.
Yep.
In a timely fashion. And like I said, and we can ask Melissa and the treasurer for any input too, but in my recollection, Melissa, whenever we did notice something like an overpayment or an underpayment, it was resolved. Like I remember one time, the system actually had someone in for a bunch of extra hours. And I think, and I don't know the legality of it or the process of it, they just went in and took that money out of the account that had been put in.
Mhm.
So it's not like once we put it in, it's too late to fix it.
Okay.
That's correct.
So that's all good stuff to keep in mind. I'll take a look based on these comments. And did you have comments on these comments, Susan?
The
That you
one I
had made?
just shared, I don't think I submitted these, I mean, I made them, but I didn't submit them, let me just check.
If you want to just email, I mean, I'd be happy to kind of.
Sure,
take this on.
I'll just email you my,
Yeah,
and I'll send them to you guys, I'll send her to Frank and Melissa as well.
and then we can, like, any question that I had that were kind of answered and don't need wording changes, obviously we can just go ahead, but I think some of them deserve some changes, but I can work on that with your comments in mind as well. Okay. Oh, Melissa, I have one other question.
Okay.
Do you think that the Berkshire County Retirement Director could come in and speak with us, or if we could just send questions, because I have questions about how the retirement system works, based on the retirement systems that I've heard about were usually based on compensation, and were some percentage of your compensation for some number of years. And I'm interested about how the hours factor into that. I am aware that they do, and I saw your email. I'm just curious what's going on, because what about positions that fluctuate? Like, what are they doing with those hours? How does that affect your retirement plan? I'm just,
So, I do have her scheduled to come in September, so she can tell you about the changes to the assessments going forward to the towns. But the short answer is it has to do with any kind of buybacks.
Yeah.
Have can happen in town before with the library director before he was a 20-hour-a-week employee. He needed to buy back his time before when he became the 20-hour employee, and it was really difficult, I guess, to prove that. The treasurer told me it took time to gather that information because they didn't have actual hours that were worked. It also, we have another position in town that it could potentially affect because they have a position in another town. And she said that if you can't prove how many hours you worked, you actually only end up getting 1 month of credit for every year that you've worked.
wow. Yeah, that's the tax collector, Melissa,
Yeah,
that you refer.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why, well, I don't really understand the buyback process, so I can't really understand why.
Yeah.
But it's confusing to me. If they know people are working for the town and making money, why would it negatively affect them? Like, they know that they're working for the town and being paid. I don't know, it just seems,
Yeah.
I'm curious to understand how it works. Why would, and now that is even new data, 12 months would equal 1 month if you don't have hours.
It is bizarre. I mean, if they're paid X dollars and the retirement is typically a percentage of what you were paid, why
It's
should
not,
it matter
though.
how much?
It's not.
Oh,
It's
it's
based
not.
on the time you worked. It's like Don Tirico. He's a part-time building inspector. He only because he's part-time, and he gets to stay in the
Only what?
system because he was previously in it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's all a calculation of how many hours you work.
But when you go into retirement, is the amount of hours that you work dictating your payout each month? Or how long you get to stay in
The defined pension typically will say, like, what were your last 3 years of your earnings? And then you get a percentage of that, which like you were talking about. But with and I don't know if this is accurate, is because it's usually, someone with less than 20 hours is not considered a full FTE, so they are handled differently.
But we have like an instance where someone was a full-time employee or met the threshold to be part of the program. Now he's not. It sounds like he's still, based on what Melissa's saying, he's still paying into the program.
But sometimes
We
it's
have So he wasn't a
grandfathered in.
full-time employee here. He was a full-time employee in another town, and because he worked for another town, he then became eligible here.
I
See what I'm
would
saying?
ask him, usually these are defined pensions. There has to be a document that says how that pension works.
You can go to BerkshireRetirement.com, I believe.
Yeah.
But
There
she's
has to
coming
be
in, I believe it's the second week in September.
There has to be a document, that tells you outline. We should have it here, so if we want to read it or something, go online and download it. But by law, they have to have it, I'm sure.
Well, I'm looking at Berkshire County Retirement System and I see annual reports and forms and such, so hopefully we can find what Frank's talking about.
Yeah, there has to be a document saying how it works.
And they have a records access officer, so we can ask them
Yeah, that's the law.
for it. Okay, so that was my only thing, and so she'll come in, and so we can find that form. Frank, whether you find it, or Melissa, if you get a hold of it, please just forward it to us, or whoever finds it. And then if we have remaining questions, she'll be coming in anyway.
Yeah.
And I will work on the payroll policy based on Melissa and the treasurer's comments and Susan's comments and Frank's addition. Unanticipated business. I have one item, which is that the community center director resigned.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, effective at the end of next month.
Yeah.
So I spoke briefly with Lori Shaw this afternoon, just before the meeting. And she said that the community center committee that she chairs would like to go over the job description and propose a new job description to the select board and an advertisement for the position and do the interviews and ultimately, hopefully propose a new candidate. And I told Lori that I would just run that by the board, that process by the board, and see if we had any input. I already told her that it would be worthwhile to check in with Sophia about, as she goes over the job description, maybe things like the new sick policies and such need to be included. Melissa?
Oh, so that was what I was gonna bring up as well. I spoke with Sophia this afternoon about the hiring, and we both agree, if the board does, that since you have or any designee of their choice
Sorry.
to do the interviews
Melissa, you went
and
out for a bit, so we missed
Oh.
most of what you said.
Sorry. I said I spoke with Sophia this afternoon, and we both agree that since the board, created a standardized hiring process some time ago, that, we feel that this position, since it's a paid position, should also follow that, and that, the interviews and going over the job description and everything, the interview questions, that Lori or whoever their designee is should all, definitely be a part of the process. But I think we should keep it standardized where it's done through the town administrator and the HR director.
Where's the policy about standardized hiring?
You guys did that quite some time ago. I don't think you wrote a written policy, but you agreed that went through myself,
I feel like all of the hires we've done, at least in the last, I don't know, 8 months, have all gone that way. Can you think of any that didn't?
Well, we've done slightly different things, depending whether it's a department head or not. For Brian's hiring, I feel like we've had various hiring processes depending, and he's a department head, but we had Scott sit in on the initial interviews with Sophia, Melissa, and Gareth, the outgoing department head.
Cause I feel like we had a conversation, because we felt like, given the importance of the position and the nature of the department head, it was important that we have input there. So I felt like that was discussed as kind of not an exception, but that we needed an extra level of involvement. But other than that department head position, I feel like we've kind of been consistent. I'm not saying there's a policy, but I feel like we've had some consistency, and I'm not sure I feel like if we're not gonna be consistent, there should be a good reason for it.
We just talked about, hiring for the Highway 4. But did we advertise that position? Because we talked about advertising the community, Mary's job.
Did we?
Right.
Did we advertise for that? Highway 4?
No, I mean,
I mean,
my feeling is just that because our departments are fairly unique, and sometimes it's department head, sometimes it's not, who is the department head of the community center? Is it the community center director? Is it the chair of the committee? I think ultimately the select board should sign off on a new job description, because the community center committee is an ad hoc committee that works under the select board. I think that the select board should ultimately make the appointment of community center director, because again, the community center committee is an ad hoc committee under the select board. But I also think that the committee itself, or subcommittee it creates, can propose that job description and that candidate to the select board. I think that they should consult with the town administrator and the HR director about how they're gonna conduct the interview process and how they're going to create the job description, but I don't see why they can't do the interviews and then propose a candidate themselves, since they're the ones working on the day-to-day with the community center director. That's just my
So
2
the
cents.
only involvement HR would have would be helping to vet the job description?
well, I think you would think that she would be advising them that, oh, well, what are your interview questions? What is your structure for doing the interview? Because when I was in business, you had to be consistent from one person to the other. Couldn't have a different set of questions and things like that, giving them a guideline, coaching them along the way. I don't see a problem with that.
Do you think it would be prudent to have her present at the interviews? Or you don't think it's necessary? I don't know, I'm just wondering what involvement we do want.
I would add too, I mean, this position really isn't any different than the Council on Aging, which, was handled by myself, HR, and the chair of the committee, and that's a position on aging, but still reports to the town administrator, kind of similar to this one. I don't see why it would be any different if the committee's
Well,
included.
I know that Lori felt strongly that the committee wanted to draft the job description to propose to the select board and wanted to oversee the hiring process, which made sense to me given their intimate involvement with whoever the director becomes. I think one thing that we come back to is that we have an ad hoc committee, and we discussed this a month or 2 ago, and we never got any resolution on it. What exactly is the authority of that ad hoc committee?
Yep.
It's all about the permit.
The select board in that case ultimately ended up signing off on the permit, which I think made a lot of sense because it's the authorized signatory for the town. But, maybe we should have Lori, because it was a last minute thing, we couldn't get Lori here, but, I'd be open to meeting with Lori or some members of the community center committee next week and just discussing the hiring process and the advertising process and what they're looking forward to. I think, I don't know. Mickey did have.
Yeah, cause I had a little exposure to these things, but I think that, it has to be a work together. Because HR does have a set format, and that works and that's good. But in every department, there are specifics that are not always in the general thing, and therefore, they should have that input, that this is what we need here. So that's an added to the general format that is used. So I really think they have to be a part of the process. They can't be eliminated from it, and they should be able to, get from HR what she wants in the format, and then they can use that format and put in their own.
I'm just gonna throw out, I 100% agree with you. I guess what's confusing me is that I feel like what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm just mishearing it, I'm totally, it's totally possible, but I sort of feel like what I heard coming from Sophia was that it could be a joint process with their involvement, but also HR and TA involvement, and what I hear the community center proposing is that they do it, they just consult with HR and then they do it.
So they
And
asked.
I guess I'm not sure why, I think it should be both,
It
like,
should- it should be a
I'm
joint.
more on the joint.
You have to at least
situation.
have the personnel person involved, because you.
Well, and no one's
It's
saying
just a question of
HR
the level of
shouldn't be
involvement, I
involved.
think.
Yeah.
Melissa, has Sophia been doing interviewing for open positions in each case?
Most of them, yes. Yes, most of them she
Did she
sat
do-
in with me.
Cause I thought for some positions, like, did she interview Sheldon for Highway 4?
She did not, but she wasn't available. And now that she's here 2 days a week, I think it's gonna be a lot easier to include her in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is at the end of the day, she knows the structure and she knows how to go about it, but does she need to sit on, if there's 6 interviews,
Right.
get a half an hour, that's half of her work week here or something.
Right.
Almost. Does she sit on? Maybe not. Maybe like Frank said, it's a matter of she helps them with knowing what's legal and what's best practice in the process, but doesn't necessarily sit in on every interview, because maybe that's not useful.
I guess
That's
I
okay, but I
wanna
think
see
at least I
everything
need to
working
sit in on it.
I just wanna see that the different parts of town are working with each other and not becoming like segregated or oppositional.
Yeah.
I think that more cooperative work is better,
Mhm.
that's sort of my, I don't see, if there's a reason not to, I'm okay with that, and if the reason not to is that the scheduling's too hard, well then, you know. I'm not trying to keep out anyone's input, like, when the Concom puts someone forward, like, we had to come back and say, we didn't think it was a great idea to have someone who wasn't from the town. But if they're putting forward a candidate, I'm not gonna say that they shouldn't, right, that they have a better sense of what the job is. So I'm not saying, it's not that I don't want someone involved, it's that I want more people involved
Yeah.
rather than fewer people.
Well, let's put it on the agenda for next week.
Okay.
And then, cause I heard what Sophia said, through you, and what Sophia said through Lori.
But maybe hearing it from
But
Sophia
yeah,
would be good.
So let's do that. Is there other unanticipated business? I'm trying to remember. Oh, Melissa just posted, thank you, Melissa, the all select board meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
You mean the all board
The
meeting?
28th?
Oh, the RSDP, yeah, okay.
At Sheffield Senior.
Senior Center,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I think we can all make that.
yeah, it's on my,
6 o'clock.
yeah, it was earlier than I thought, but I already changed my calendar for it.
Oh, I need to add that to my calendar.
I do have one item just for you guys to start thinking about, not that you haven't already been, but on the Concom, Tim Lovett is not gonna stay on past the end of this month, and that leaves 2 members on there. I have reached out to Mark Little to see if he'd be interested in coming back for maybe a 6-month period, but I'll throw a little crazy idea out there, is that maybe the 3 selectmen should sit on it as well until we can find people. I'm just saying, if they don't have a quorum, they're not gonna be able to have any meetings.
We can do that. I mean, I think if there's no conservation, it's like many of the appointed boards, the select board kind of has them to reduce the workload on the select board. My only concern with that would be if we can learn all the rules and do the commission justice. Maybe start.
I mean, the other option, you appoint Kim, who's the agent, to vote. You know, she's not a resident, but she is very familiar with, and I'm not asking you to decide on anything right now, but just thinking about it, because there's only 2 weeks until Tim won't be on there anymore. They had to cancel their meeting the other day due to a lack of a quorum, and I believe they're gonna try to reschedule within the next 2 weeks before Tim leaves.
So quorum for 3-person commission is 2 people, right? They couldn't get
Yes,
2
according to the
people.
open meeting law, it's the majority of the active members, but if they only have 2
Yeah.
people,
Then is one person a majority, I don't know, but, so they had a situation where they had 3 members and they couldn't get 2.
Yes, there was a little bit of confusion with yesterday's meeting. So I can get into that later if you want. I don't have the text in front of me, but they were told one thing and ended up being another. But yes, 3 is what they need to have.
Were they afraid that they needed 3 out of 3 and they had 2?
They were afraid that they needed 4. The MACC was telling them they actually needed 4 because the current membership is 7, even though they don't have 7 sitting.
But open meeting law says current,
Right.
current appointed, active,
Right,
so
but
does CCC overrule the open meeting law?
That's what we were led to believe the other day, but so we're still researching that.
Okay. I mean, we just have to find a couple people.
Speaking
Or
of
qualified
which,
people.
in going through the minutes, I noted that we talked about trying to get something out about what's going on with the Concom.
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to talk to
Noelle
them?
emailed me, I owe her an email.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll follow up with her.
Okay.
She had more or less, it sounds like she more or less heard what the outcome of the discussion was, but I need to clarify that, yes.
But I think what we talked about was that it would be great to have her write something up for the Monterey. About what their work is and why it's important and what kind of projects they've had come before them, just because maybe people don't volunteer for it because they don't really know what the content is like or why it's important or what the commission's actually doing, and having a better sense of that and how important it is might encourage people to step forward. Or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I will touch base with Noelle again. Is there other unanticipated business?
That was the only note I had, was just about our office.
Oh,
What?
Dark Skies, Janet.
Oh, right.
I'm going Friday night.
To Friday night,
Yeah.
Dark Skies. I think that I have a conflict, so I think I won't be there. I'm not, so, 2 things. If we do want a dark sky bylaw, I'm fairly certain that's a zoning bylaw that's under the jurisdiction of the planning board, if I'm not mistaken.
Good question.
So,
Although there's 2 different pieces. The town deciding to be dark skies compliant in the town's efforts is different than a bylaw requiring residents to.
yes, exactly. So what I was going at was more the dark sky compliant bylaw, which I think is a zoning bylaw. There's a separate question of what is the town doing to be dark sky compliant, regardless of any bylaw that exists.
Right.
How do we wanna move forward on this issue? So Frank's gonna attend Friday night.
I need to get more educated.
Yeah, me
I
too.
don't know enough about the comment. I know that, Jim in the, community meeting the other morning was talking about they're changing over some of the light fixtures in town at the LED, that's the National Grid. If you read her email, Janet's email, that there are different spectrums of LED lights now, but it doesn't mean National Grid will have them. So, I don't know, I think I gotta get educated before you try to.
And somebody could, I know that the wavelength of the light that things are putting in can have a big impact on how you perceive the light. I don't even see the Christmas tree lights, right? The original version of LED lights, they were much lower power, but they were very blue, and I have to say that I hated that. I found that light very unpleasant to look at. And I'm sensitive to it. So my husband would just pick up LED lights to put in our house. And a light would go out, and he'd put it in, and I'd walk in and I'd be like, whoa, you gotta change that one. I'm like, it's so, I get the
I-
issue,
you
it
know, I
can be an
mean-
LED and it can be lower
Yeah,
energy,
but
but it's still an unpleasant
There's
thing.
questions, what does it mean? What's the LED and what is out in the market?
Yep, and what's out in the marketplace and what does National Grid have available?
I know,
All,
Yeah.
they're not all the same thing.
right, so, we'll just take Friday going back to school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe get a little more informed.
We
before
need to get informed, I'm not opposed to it, but I'm not ready to.
But Jen also raised a really interesting question about, I've thought about it, but I never really brought it forward, like, we have a few streetlights in Monterey, but the number of people walking on the street is very low, right?
I don't
So,
know, you see-
When you drive, you have headlights. Walking on the street at night is low,
Yeah, right there.
at night. It's high in the day, but it's low at
Well,
night.
So what's really interesting is, that's a good point, why do we have streetlights if people aren't walking on the road? And we're not a city where there's, or a town where there's
Lots of sidewalks.
businesses that are open at night and people walking on sidewalks between business. But if you go to neighboring towns like Sanesfield, sometimes they have streetlights in the middle of the road. I mean, there's no center and it will be like a sharp corner and there's a streetlight kind of in the middle of nowhere.
But I think it's a good question, why?
Yeah.
I mean, there might
Is
be
it
a
a
reason
safety
why, but I don't know what the
Is
reason
it
is.
a safety thing? Is it that, most people aren't out walking at night, but
Yeah,
the
but
person who lives in the village who walks their dog,
Right.
it's, people do have headlights, but it's a heck of a lot safer.
Mhm.
Maybe there's proof that it's a heck of a lot safer with those lights, even though we all have headlights on our vehicle.
Yeah, but then the speed of the vehicle, but I don't know, there is, the safety issue. Usually lights are put in places along the road, corners and things of that nature, so I don't know.
Well, one thing would be if, let's say the general store is open, and
Mhm.
let's say it's open at night, and there's live music or something, and it's open till 10, you definitely want more lighting for public safety, right?
Yeah,
Because not everyone's gonna be in cars, but it's certainly beyond the general store area where there's lighting in the center of town.
and by the way, I'm not saying we shouldn't have them, I'm just saying that I don't know enough to
I
understand
don't
what
know, I
the rules are about
understand.
when you have and why
How
you
much
need it.
control do you have over it?
Well, I
With
think,
that National Grid, they seem
well,
to slow
I
the
think
change.
we're the ones that ask for the
We-
light bulbs.
What, the light bulbs at the community center?
Well, those ones I know
Those
we asked.
we asked for, these other ones, I think we'd have to look into it, but I think if the select board, didn't want them, we could probably get rid of them, because when National Grid came and updated the streetlights, they asked for permission to do that from the select board.
But
that's
you
where
know,
some of
what
the-
bulbs, okay, they're going to LED, what bulbs did they take out? What fixture did they take out? And
We
two,
knew-
is we pay for the electricity on those bulbs, there's, like these different accounts, so I'm not, I just think we have a little bit of
I don't know.
information, but not a lot.
Exactly, and I guess, I think there's a
We just gotta
budget
work
question,
through it, I
yeah.
understand, if we can get to the goal, that's great, but how do we get there,
And what is the goal?
Right.
Is the goal more
Well,
light,
Is
is
the
the
goal,
goal?
is the goal
dark
energy
side?
efficiency?
Right.
Because in this instance, these new lights were much more efficient, they use a lot less
I think
electricity.
LED is by far, you cannot go wrong with an LED.
But-
The complaint about an LED is the limited spectrum.
But that's
But,
changed a lot, and the
that's
question is
changing.
what's available for these lights
Right,
from that,
but
right?
yeah, but you have to have the right fixture on the
Right.
pole.
Yep.
And Janet, she raises that issue in there that the LED that she has seen that we have is not the right. I don't want to say it's not the right, and in my opinion, she implied it was not the right spectrum.
Or not the spectrum that's most desirable.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see side by side to see, to understand it.
Well, there's numbers that
Yeah, you can
quantify
find
this
that,
stuff,
yeah.
right?
Yep.
Okay, so you both will go to the meeting and then
Yep.
maybe we'll
So
take.
I keep it on the agenda, we need to start talking about it.
I
If we
agree.
can have her come in and talk to us one night too.
And I think also one thing to pay attention
So we
to on
need to go-
Friday is the
I-
distinction between, the spectrum, the Kelvin, and the spectrum is separate, I think, from intensity. And I think it's important that we have information about both, and the intensity was not something that she sought to raise, but I wanna pay attention to it on Friday, because, you can have light of a certain wavelength, and you have more of it or less of it, that's intensity.
Right.
Whereas there's also, if you have the same intensity in two different wavelengths, you're also gonna perceive them differently, but they're not the same thing, intensity and wavelength.
Yeah, I forwarded her email to Melissa and Jim, or Brian, and Jim and Brian, because Jim had just talked about it on a Monday. And, you know, she recommended the police, asked the, police chief.
Yeah. Cool, alright, well, I'll see you
Okay.
Friday.
Comments and questions from the public? None. Of minutes?
There we go. We've only got one, exciting.
Yeah, we can delete the first thing that Susan asked to delete, I think.
Yep, okay.
Um,
Payment dispute resolution, yeah, it's
and
the
method
same
of
thing.
payment dispute resolution, so that's redundant.
Yeah. Okay. Am I correct on 5, Frank?
Yeah, because I was waiting to hear back from
Yep.
her.
I think images, we made it, what clarifies reviewed maps of the native plant.
Okay.
That would probably clarify maps of the native plant areas.
That works.
And I think the word next paragraph is good, and the Curtis Road Bridge letter.
Oops, sorry about the misspelling of concern.
Versus.
Under the,
Oh,
yeah,
I see.
the second.
I think that comment's good. And then the theme is leadership, energy, and environmental design is good. And then I think regarding Hume,
Mm-hmm.
I think your first comment is good for that sentence. Justin, Tom, and Donna had a phone conference regarding the site plan for the RV park and the possibility of Hume offering a town pilot.
I was just trying to make sure that pilot got what it actually means, got in there somewhere.
And then Justin said that Hume, I think we believe their plan, the part about it's not contingent,
Right.
that'll be assumed. Justin said that Hume was reaching out as a kind gesture to see if there is anything that they can do to smooth out relations with the town. Justin said one idea would be to ask Hume to commit to an annual pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just double change.
Yep.
Or paying for a specific project, whether it be a road improvement on Chestnut Hill and Cronk Road or another project.
Sounds good. The rest all looks good to me.
Alright.
You got anything, Frank?
No,
Motion to approve the minutes of August 8th, 2023 as amended.
Second.
We'll vote,
Yeah.
yes,
and yes, that's unanimous approval. Melissa, I'll put those in the mailbox.
Thank you.
Thank you, hope your knee feels better.
Yes, it's starting to.
Do we need to adjourn so you can run?
No, let me check what it is. Yeah, we might as well.
Is there any?
Motion to adjourn,
Second,
we'll vote
yes.
yes, unanimous. The meeting is adjourned at 8:05 PM. I'll go check that out at least. What's going on? I will
Thank
come
you,
back to
gentlemen,
this
for another
later.
productive, meeting.
Good.
Getting old.
Actually, Susan,
What about,
could you please put that in the, let me check, yeah, that in the,
what's this one?
the whole thing.
All of it.
I'll come back.